All right, hey there, Beltalotas and Ennis. Since book tour and conventions are still on a staggered return, I figured I'd bring book tour to you. So welcome to Russ's Rockin' Rollercoaster, Season 6, Intriguing Interviews with Creative Minds. Well, sci-fi shows come and go, but every so often we're treated to something truly special. And in this case, we're talking about The Expanse, right? Remember the can't. All right. We took a deep dive last year about the series to date at that point. But now that it's reached its conclusion, we're going to dig into the final season while asking and answering the ring-size question of them all. Did they stick the landing? First up on our panel is my friend and returning guest, Kelli Fitzpatrick. Kelli is an author, educator, and writer of sci-fi and fantasy. She won the Strange New Worlds 2016 contest for a Star Trek story, and she is currently writing the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game for Modiphius. Welcome back, Kelli.
Hi, great to be back, Russ.
All right, Kel. Also on our panel is my pal and returning guest, J.L. Gribble, who is a freelance fiction editor and writes the urban fantasy alternate history Steel Empires series. Welcome, J.L.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right, just to folks, heads up to the folks at home, feel free to send me notes or questions you have for the panel in the chat box during the show, and we'll get to a few at the end. All right, now a second heads up. Now that The Expanse is concluded, there's been ample time to catch up, so we will be getting into some spoilers. So if you don't want any of the surprises ruined, you might want to take a proto-molecule-sized pill and stick one in each ear. Now, as a third heads up, we are going to be discussing The Expanse as it pertains to the TV show only. Absolutely under no circumstances are you to spoil anything that takes place in the final 3 books. So if you know about plot points or character developments that happen in the books beyond season 6, but have not been addressed in the show, please be respectful and keep them to yourself. Any violators will be locked in an enclosed room with Amos, who has permission to space you. All right, so let's jump in. All right, so before we get into the details of the final season, and before we answer the big question, did they stick the landing? Having watched all 6 seasons, what's your take about The Expanse, regardless of what you thought about the ending? And we'll start with Kelli.
This is one of my favorite sci-fi shows, and I think it has incredible rewatch value. I was just going back, trying to search for some data point. I was just like skimming through an episode and ended up like rewatching like half of season 4, I think, because it's just the narrative just drags you in. The characters are so compelling. The world building is phenomenal. It's my exact flavor of like realistic hard sci-fi plus cosmic wonder, like together. That it's an amazing show, I think, all the way through. I have favorite plot lines and seasons, as everyone does, but overall it is a gem, and I think will remain a gem of science fiction storytelling.
All right, JL?
I totally agree with you about the rewatchability. And beyond that, I think it's because it is so rooted in like real science. I think it will actually stand the test of time for decades to come in ways that some other science fiction shows haven't, because of just the plausibility of what's going on and in combination with the effects that they use. But this is the sci-fi show that actually does more than give lip service to the fact that as humanity leaves Earth, like Earth cultures beyond Earth won't have as much homogeneity. And it actually showed like the true melting pot of what humanity will become.
I agree with a lot of what you guys are saying. And I think, for me, one of the elements that has stuck with me, and Kelli, you're right, when you rewatch it, and I've rewatched it now a couple of times, and what I find is because the plotting is intricate and there's so many layers to it, and the characters themselves have real depth, is that every time when I go back and I watch, I go, I don't remember. Either I didn't remember that so-and-so happened, or I didn't remember it quite that way, or I'm realizing that wait, I thought that happened in season 5, but it happened in season 2, or the reverse, because they're of the various components that go into it. So when I watch it again, I can find it to be, even though I know what happens, you forget over time, but it's such a new and nuanced experience when I watch it. And it's sort of really kind of joyful, almost to be surprised, even though it's a show I've already seen, right? And you just, anytime that you watch an episode or a season, a story arc, whatever it is, you are in that moment in time and space, whatever headspace that you're in. But the next time you watch it, you're going to be in a completely different headspace. And you're a little bit older, you've changed a little bit, your perspectives change. So the show, even though the show hasn't changed, in your mind it has. And that kind of gives it its own kind of wonder to it. All right, so now that we can reflect on the entire series, most of the characters had their own arcs. I mean, we're talking over, either one season, a couple seasons, or the entire series, and some that went deeper than others. Talk to me about a character whose arc you most identify with. JL.
Hands down, Naomi Nagata. Her life is so different from mine. And usually people tend to identify more with the characters whose lives are, you can see yourself in. But just in terms of the struggles that she had growing up, and then leaving that world and leaving Marcos and kind of resigning herself to just being an engineer on an ice hauler. And then she almost kind of like gets dragged back in regardless of her best intentions. But she steps up. And honestly, I think that even though Holden is kind of like the face of the Rocinante and the Expanse, Naomi is, the heart and the soul of the story.
100%. Yes. Kelli?
Every time I see a scene with Kamina Drummer in it, I'm like, you are like one of my favorite characters. I just love her grit and the fact that she is 100% loyal to her values. Like, she never wavers from doing what she believes is best for the belt, which is a complex drive to want to legitimately help people. And she's also just this amazing badass. And so I always am rooting for her. And I find her perseverance very inspiring.
I agree with both. For different reasons. Kamina Drummer is sort of, to different degrees. I think a lot of the characters have some of this, but Kamina Drummer has so many of the qualities that I wish I had. I mean, I can't say that if I was in her shoes that I could step up every day the way that she does. I mean, she is fierce and loyal and brave, but really it's really interesting how, so take Naomi, for example, who is just this wonderful character. And if it's not one of the most underrated, underappreciated performances, not just in sci-fi TV, in any TV, that I don't know who else would be up there, because her performance was just absolutely spectacular, the layers of it. But, maybe it's being a parent myself and knowing the struggles that you have with your kids and the torture that you go through to sort of be the best person and the best a role model for your kids, and some of the really tough decisions that you have to make about, pushing them and guiding them, but letting them have enough space to become their own person. Naomi allowed this gentleness to kind of pervade through her storyline, where with, Drummer was definitely more of the, a little bit more of the militant, more of the overt fighter in her, but her passion was no less sincere.
Yeah, but the writers did a good job of balancing that, because we have some scenes with Naomi that are just excruciating to watch because of the amount of pain that she's in, and yet she gets through it. And then also we get to see Drummer in love scenes, in vulnerable scenes,
Yes.
in positions where she's like legitimately just grappling with some tough stuff, and yet
Absolutely.
she's just as edgy and interesting.
Yeah, I mean, really, like, you know, when in those moments when Drummer sort of, you know, allows the vulnerability to shine through, and you see the quake in her face and her whole body, like you feel every molecule of that of those emotions kind of come through the performance. It was really staggering, and I thought that, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, but just, you know, in the lexicon of all, let's say for sci-fi TV, to have, you know, not just the two of them, but even Avasarala and Bobby Draper. I mean, just these female characters who just, it's not even a matter that they held their own with the boys. I mean, they were legitimately the star. I mean, you could argue they're the stars of the show.
They were people. Like,
yes.
they're well-rounded characters,
exactly
rather
right.
than just being an archetype of
Correct.
a soldier or whatever.
But they were also still allowed to be women.
Yes.
They weren't just, you know, shoehorned into their roles and could have been replaced by a male character, which, especially for Kamina Drummer, in that they did blend a bunch of characters, including male characters from the books, in order to create her for the show. And Ty Frank said in his podcast that, you know, one of the reasons that they kept doing that was because the actress Cara G just had such amazing chemistry with absolutely everyone that there was like no point in hiring anybody else when she could just be amazing and pull it off.
Yeah, well, she was really, I mean, just stunning. What a character, what a performance. Just, you know, those are two characters that will forever sort of be, you know, emblazoned on my brain. All right, so every good space opera, and, you know, the Expanse was military sci-fi, some space opera, but every good space opera needs a good villain. And yet the best villains are not necessarily villainous, but have a specific point of view where they don't even see themselves as the villain, rather justifying their behavior as a means to what they believe is a right or virtuous end. So talk to me about Marcos and Oros, the biggest bad the Rocinante crew had to face. Kelli.
Oh, what do I even say about Marco? I mean, he's like repulsive in every way. Like, he's such a megalomaniac, like crazy person. I mean, he makes a compelling villain in that sense. I hated to see the way that he manipulated his son, like, you know, to do things. I don't know. I think that, like, there were some times when I think he maybe seemed a little too one-dimensionally evil. Like, I never like related to him at all. Like, I had no like sympathy or anything for him, other than the fact that I didn't want Naomi and Philip to be, you know, devastated in their interactions with him. But he was very convincing in the sense of, like, when people are desperate and hurting, it's very easy to play on those fears and legitimate needs and spin them. You know, he was able to spin those needs of the belt into his own, you know, sort of agenda. So in that sense, he made an excellent, like, political villain.
Right. Dale?
Yeah, he was like, by the end of the season, he hadn't even, like, he bought too much into his own hype, I want to say. And I like that his entire, like, it wasn't just on Philip's shoulders to be the, like, dissenting voice to, like, show the audience, oh no, this is bad. Like, he had multiple other belters, even who were supposedly on his team, like, trying to pull him back from the edge all the time. And I think that made him even more interesting as a villain, because it's not like it was just some, like, random Klingons that you show up on a bridge and you talk to them through a view screen and then they go off and you shoot at each other. You know, it was he and Philip and his entire ship and crew had their own character arcs as well.
I thought it was, that the moment where you kind of go, this guy is just really, whatever he claimed his motivations were, when he left them, was it on, maybe I'm getting confused. Was it when they left them on Ganymede he just said, no, just leave them all, like who cares? They'll be the sacrifice. Was it Ganymede where they captured the ship? I'm losing track. The ship where he sacrificed them at the end. He just said, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, strip it for parts. And it was just, at places, his rallying cry was rooted in something very real, and to the Belters, very just, right? They've had, as they said, the boot of Earth and Mars were on their necks for 50, 75 years, however long it was. And it was time to, push that boot off and, let us have freedom. And on a larger scale, you could understand, yeah, I'm tired of being subjugated. And the only way we're going to get our freedom is to fight back. Okay. But ultimately, though, he sort of revealed himself to be, is that we don't want equality. I want to be in charge now. It's my turn to rule, right? The Belters may have wanted equality, but he certainly did not. He wanted to be basically Vader, right? Like, I want to rule all. And it was sort of a little difficult to sort of, I agree at times, I thought that he was a little bit, of all the characters on the show, he actually seemed to have some of the least amount of nuance, I felt.
Yeah, we don't get any backstory on him that's like meaningful in any way other than his relationship to Naomi and Phillips.
Right. So let's take part 2 of Marcos, right? So and I wanted to ask, and I thought a lot about this. So how much of his point of view was so when we talk about how much of his point of view in your mind was righteous, and I just mentioned a little bit, and how much it was just pure ego dressed up as a noble cause?
Both. Like I said, like, he started to believe his own mythology, and that kind of led to his eventual downfall. I think he started from what he thought was a good place, in terms of, well, Belter culture is going to die out if all of a sudden humanity can expand to all these planets. So it was kind of a last, it wasn't even really a cry for freedom so much as it was a cry for survival.
Right.
But he just went about it in such a bonkers, batshit insane way. because you also had like Mars in comparison, and we didn't get as much of that point of view, but Mars saw the writing on the wall as well. It was like, what's the point of continuing to put all this effort into terraforming Mars when, again, we have all these other planets that we could settle instead? And so that was kind of like a subtle dichotomy, but it was interesting to see.
So speaking of Inaros, so to me, Philip was a lot more complicated and complex than Marcos. So my question to you, and I'm curious here, because I've thought quite a bit about this, how much of Philip's bad behavior do you excuse because of the way his father manipulated him, versus how much should he be personally held responsible for the pretty terrible things that he actually did?
This is exactly what we're studying right now in my value theory grad class, is to what extent can people be held morally responsible for their own actions? There's this really interesting article by Susan Wolf called Sanity and the Metaphysics of Moral Responsibility. And she basically argues that people who are, that do horribly like immoral things, so like Marco would absolutely fall into this club, like people who are insane can't be held morally responsible. I kind of disagree with that to some extent, because I definitely hold Marco responsible for his actions. And on the one hand, like, it's not Philip's fault that he's in that situation. But he's also, I think, old enough through, at least in season 6, I think he's old enough to understand the choices that he's making. And so I would argue that there's definitely if not total, at least a large amount of moral responsibility there for the choices that he's making. And I think we can see evidence of that on screen. I think the show is showing us that he knows he's morally responsible, like when he accidentally kills his friend and it's getting to him, and when he realizes that his father, made the Belters go kill each other, like it's eating him up inside. So if you're able to feel that sort of like guilt and remorse, then I think you're able to weigh the consequences of your actions.
JL?
Yeah, I think that the way that they structured his storyline was so amazing because it was both like horrific and heartbreaking at the same time, especially when he killed his friend. And then even how, so many little things that just kind of added up, and you even from before season 6, and you could see him start to kind of realize, this isn't such a great idea. But at the same time, he was committed to his father because he felt that Naomi had, not chosen him. So he tried to stand by his father to the bitter end until he realized that things had just gone too far. So you have to admire that a little bit too.
So at the end, he does get away. Do you think that is, and he'll go wherever he goes and do whatever he does, did he earn that outcome? Did he earn the chance to sort of get away and potentially start over?
I don't think he earned that, but I think Naomi earned that, even if she never knows.
Yeah, I think she earned it for him, but also I think the Expanse as a world, as a franchise, believes in second chances and believes in allowing characters to sort of reinvent themselves. So it makes sense to me that he would maybe get that chance.
All right, fair enough. All right, so continue on that thread. Holden, oh, good gravy, Holden. He could have ended the Inaros reign of terror long before we got to the end. What do you think of his decision to deactivate the missile that could have destroyed them, ending the war earlier and saving who knows how many lives?
I'm torn on this because, it's they got into this war with Marco because Drummer did that exact thing, right? She didn't vote to get rid of Marco when they had the chance, and
I forgot about that. You're right.
So like Holden essentially makes the exact same call that then has the exact same outcome of allowing the war to continue and exacerbate. But at the same time, like I understand that drive of that compassion that is Holden's more like it's part of his moral compass of like, don't kill if you don't have to. And also the fact that relationships are really important to him. And so the fact that Philip was there that's all Holden needed to see to, do it. I mean, from a tactical perspective, it was stupid. From a moral perspective, it's understandable.
So I'll play devil's advocate. Was it moral for him to do that? So he weighed his personal feelings, his relationship with Naomi, and essentially decided the intimacy that the two of us share is more important than the lives that may get lost because of this one choice.
Yeah, and that's an interesting perspective, and that's kind of a like consequentialist view of like you should make decisions based on the long string of consequences that are going to play out from this one decision. But that's putting a lot of responsibility on one human to be responsible for all of the ways that the universe could be spanning out from this one choice. And I think that's part of what we see in Holden's arc is him becoming less like letting go of some responsibility of like, maybe it's not my job to run the whole solar system and maybe I can make the choice that I want to in this moment and let someone else solve it in the next moment. So I think it fits his character arc, even though you could argue that it's maybe not the best way to help most people.
He almost comes full circle in a way from the beginning of season 1 where he kind of jumps the gun and makes the wrong call that he thinks is right at the time in blaming the Martians for destruction of the Canterbury, to, you know, having the weight of the entire, you know, galaxy on his shoulders, to coming back around and once again making what might have been the wrong call, but this time he did it for much better reasons, which was, you know, for the sake of Naomi.
I mean, certainly I think on a personal level, you can absolutely appreciate the dilemma that he was facing. And had he not seen his face, it would have been a done deal. Click, you know, we go home. So he must have been torn, you know, whether or not, you know, whether it was, even if it was understandable, was it the right thing to do? You know, I don't know. I mean, you could probably argue it either way. I mean, tactically, it was moronic, but was it human? Sure. And, you know, he let the chips fall where they may. All right, so let's get to the nitty gritty here. The creators spent time, and we're talking about in season 6 here. The creators spent some time in each of those final episodes, you know, on our new planet and showing us the dogs. Now, unto itself, just for those 6 episodes, to me, I felt it was it was an unsatisfying storyline in the sense that it didn't deliver within the context of those 6 episodes what we were watching. It was a teaser of things to come. So how do you view that decision, which seemed clearly a way to maybe pave the way for a future iteration of the Expanse to deal with the final 3 books? What's your take on, was it a yay? Is it a nay? Is it somewhere in between? What do you think? We'll start with JL.
So I'm of two very different minds about it. And I can see how somebody who, I think that for people who have only watched the show, which is probably the majority of the viewers, it was a little bit of wasted space and definitely a lot of wasted production money. For the people who have read the books, of which I am one, like, I saw exactly what they were doing. And it really does lead up to the reason that Duarte, the leader of Laconia, like, pulls back from aiding Marcos, which does inevitably help lead to Marcos's downfall. So it gave a little bit of context to that decision, at least. But it was certainly not as impactful to people who haven't read the books, because for me it was amazing, but at the same time I have good friends who have not read the books and they were like, that was cool, I guess, but weird. Okay.
Kelli?
Yeah, so I agree with you, Russ, that I just wanted more of it. Like, I felt like it was just the beginning of, it had that sort of like proto molecule, like, whoa, like, what is this technology and what's happening here, you know? And but then like it just sort of stopped, and so that part of me wanted more. However, it was a nice counterpoint to the sort of very grounded war that was going on back in you know, in the main timeline, because we had lost, I mean, the alien stuff basically dropped out of the storyline in season 6. So that, I thought, brought in that sort of wonder and edge of horror that we got from the very beginning of the show, and so I liked that.
Okay, all right. I wanted more, but we didn't get it. So there you go. All right, so there's another force in the universe even more powerful than the makers of the ring gates. Yet for the implications about them, we never really got a lot about them. How did you feel about the way they handled that? And by extension, and JL, you touched on it a little bit, how it impacted the end of Marcos's reign of terror. And I'll just keep going with you, Kelli.
So I sometimes have issue accepting story solutions using either technology or powers that haven't been very well defined by the narrative. And I felt like those red entities fall into that category, that we don't really understand fully who they are and what they want and how it even works. So I was like, yeah, okay. I mean, on the one hand, really cool death scene for Marco, like he gets eaten alive slowly by these like, you know, space creatures. On the other hand, was it satisfying? No, I wanted to see Kamina get revenge on him, you know, like I wanted it to be the Belters who got to do that. So, you know, I feel like I liked the mystery, but I don't know if that was necessarily the best way to end.
Dale?
Yeah, I think it would have been cool to see Marcos and Kamina like go one-on-one somehow, but that's like, that would have been less realistic to me in terms of how the war had been fought up until then. Whereas Naomi basically using math to get aliens to kill Marcos, that was very on brand for the show. And so it worked for me in that context.
Yeah,
that's true.
I think you're right. You know, I mean, had it been, you know, we would have loved to have seen basically, you know, Kamina Drummer just put one right in his head. But that would fall under kind of more like traditional story tropes, which this show is not. It kind of does its own thing. But I have to admit, you know, when the red beams, even when they, you know, in that moment when Marcos realizes he's, you know, like he's cut off and it's done, I just didn't feel like he suffered enough. I mean, maybe that's just a little sadist in me, but I really wanted him to, like, you know, I wanted that death maybe to be dragged out just a little.
He was so entrenched in his beliefs of what he was doing that I don't think any death would have necessarily been satisfying, because it's not like he would have ever expressed even a shred of regret. I think even if Philip had been killed right next to him, he would have just held Philip up as a political prop and moved on.
Oh, that I agree. But I think, and this is just my take on it, and tell me if you agree or disagree, is that I think what would have really like destroyed Marcos the most, it's not that, you know, whether even if his son died, it was his ego. I wanted to see the death of his ego. I wanted more to him to sort of like his spirit to be broken, that for all of his grandiose machinations, to realize at the end that he was just a pawn in somebody else's game. That's kind of, I wanted him to feel that more than I wanted him to feel anything else.
I think JL's point is that he is so insane that he will spin a story for himself of how he's still in control and still the top dog, even if he's literally like lost everything.
So I think we got that satisfaction not from Marcos's ending, but from the ending for the inners. When Holden pulls his switcheroo.
That was great. Because you kind of saw, and it was weird because you don't usually see things coming in the Expanse. They're very good about that, but you kind of saw where that was going.
Oh, I didn't. I was blown away. I thought it was genius.
Because as soon as they did that, I was like, oh no, this has got to be a bait and switch. I didn't know exactly what it was going to be, but I knew something. But man, that was tasty.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, again, it's like, even as someone who's read the books, like that shocked me, because the way that they put her in power is completely different from the books, to the point that I like genuinely believed that the direction the show was going to go was Holden being in charge.
Well, and I thought it was a cool final note to Holden's arc. It was a believable sort of like him like taking this other path, but that the ending they went with is so much better.
Oh, that was great. I mean, and it's also, I mean, because Holden never really wanted to be in charge anyway.
Right.
He never wanted that, right? So, but before we move past this, because just kind of going back to Marcos, and I was thinking about this. So, of course, Drummer, one of the all-time great characters of any show. Now, when she called out Inaros for being a coward, and daring him to come after her. So to me, that was the moment which turned the tide, right? And yet, even though she never got her final, battle moment to personally settle the score, how did you feel about her landing really that fatal blow with her words as opposed to, bullets and bombs?
I think it's appropriate for her because she's always been right there on top of that sort of thing. Like she is this epitome of a great leader because she's great with words and, with physical presence. So I thought it was appropriate.
So I had heard that, or I read somewhere that the creators originally, they planned to have, because assuming they did a 10 episode season, that they had planned to have a follow-up storyline with Prax and also with Anna, but because they only had the 6, partly because of the pandemic, and I'm assuming partly because of cost, those storylines were scrapped. How did you feel about never getting a chance to revisit them? Did you care, not care?
Cool, but at the same time, they said before the season came out, like, we could have 10 okay episodes or we could have 6 really good episodes, and sacrifices must be made. And I was okay with those sacrifices as much as I loved those characters.
Yeah, I like those characters too, but I thought they left them in good places. And so I didn't feel like it was like a loose end that wasn't tied up,
I think I just liked it so much because of the way that Amos connected, the way he bonded with Prax. It was such a critical relationship for Amos, given who he was.
But they were able to do some cool stuff with him and Bobby in the finale that they worked out. Like, yep. You finally get to see these 2 military, leaders. And
also the fact that he sort of then, he became a little bit to Peaches, almost what like Naomi was to him. He could now sort of say, well, all right, you know what? I'm not the most fucked up person on the ship. Maybe you need I'll take you under. I never thought I would do this, but I'll take you under my wing. Something that he never could have, I don't think, or would have done in previous seasons. I don't think he was there. All right. So after a jaw, let's see, what do we got here? Oops, nope, sorry. All right. So after a jaw-dropping turn in season 5, Naomi didn't have quite as big a role. Now, I'm not saying it was unimportant, but not as big a role in season 6. But she gave a really soulful, powerful speech at the very end about doing the best that you can for each other while you can, not even realizing that her son, Philip, had gotten away safely. Talk to me about that final moment.
I thought it was beautiful, and I think the fact that she gave that speech before the viewers knew that Philip was safe made it even more amazing. I think that was a well done bit of directing, editing there.
Yeah, Naomi's always been this character who sort of finds the meaning in the mess. And I think it's important for that meaning to be able to stand on its own without having the most important thing to you be true. Like that statement is so much stronger because she doesn't know, but yet has sort of just accepted that it is what it is.
She was sort of, at least to be, she kind of came across, despite how crazy all their lives were, but she actually came from almost the most grounded. Her origin was a little bit more grounded in that she started off, before we even met her, she knew who she was then, right? So she had that to kind of call upon, and then she got lost for a bit and she sort of rediscovered herself, where a lot of the other characters kind of were in different ways, all kind of searching for that place to be, that sense of meaning, that sense of purpose. And I think maybe the fact that she had that sort of, she started off, she was in love with Marcos. I mean, she was young and she had a child and they had a family, and that's where she started. I mean, of course it went horribly wrong, but I think she had that sort of, that sense of belonging that she lost, rather than never having really had it and constantly searching for it. So I wonder if that sort of had an impact on, like you said, being able to find the meaning in the mess. All right. So that was great, but now it's time for a special segment on the show where we spin the wheel. On the wheel are 7 possible categories, which I created especially for this panel. Wherever it lands is what you get. And the categories are Ringgate Explorer, Heartburn, Spin Me, Star Swap, It's Miller Time, One for the Road, and Yes, Boss Man. All right, JL, you're up first. You ready?
Okay.
All right, and up, Yes, Boss Man. All right, what do we got here? What do we got? All right, so the Belters have their own dialects. If you could incorporate any of their slang into your own life now, what would it be?
Ironically, it would probably be Yes, Boss Man, because it's just enough of like English that you kind of get it, but like for some reason, even when they're like saying it like completely genuinely in the show, it always sounds a little sarcastic.
Yes, totally.
Which also comes from like every belter is kind of snarky, like
that's right,
as a cultural trait. So it works.
Totally. I'm right there with you. All right, Kelli, you ready?
Yep.
All right, what do we got? Round and round. And for Kelli, we got heartburn. Okay, now this is heartburn and hardburn. So the Rocinante goes into hard burn, putting on a ton of physical pressure on the crew, including the death of Alex Kamal. If you had the chance to travel the stars, but had to go through hard burn, which would probably give you heartburn, even once, would you do it?
Oh, probably. I mean, space is like, there's so much out there. Like, of course, you're going to go.
Okay, even though you might stroke out if you do it?
I mean, I could stroke out just sitting here. You might as well get to see space.
Right, might as well get to do something cool, right? All right, fair enough. Okay, so for the next section of the show, okay, we have four options. We got index cards here, A, B, C, and D, where you're going to pick your poison. All right, I'm not going to tell you what the categories are. A, B, C, or D. Kelli, you're up first.
We're going to C.
C, what do we got today? And C is advice column. All right. So you and I are both in the writing business. Let's go to advice column. And I think we've probably been here before. What's the best and worst writing advice someone ever gave you?
I'm going to like change it up from the last time I was on your show. Well, recently I was given just fantastic advice regarding like how to incorporate feedback on your work from workshop or from folks who read it, and really like stay focused on like the book that you want to write versus allowing other visions to come in and move that astray. I think the worst writing advice I've ever gotten was like, and this is maybe good for some people, but it doesn't work for me. And that is like, write every day the same amount of words. You have to be consistent. If you let it slip, then you suck. And like my flow is much more like seasons and waves, and that's okay.
Okay, fair enough. All right, JL, what do we got? A. Oh, all right. This is one of our newest questions. All right, so this one is all or nothing or steady as she goes. Now, it's a little bit of a longer setup, so you got to bear with me for a minute, okay? All right, so I'm going to give you two options that will define you're going to pick one, and it's going to define the rest of your career. You can only pick one, and here are the options. Okay, option number one. Your next book is an international bestseller. You win every award there is. You make tons of money. Your book gets made into a movie. It wins the Academy Award for Best Picture. You can ride this success forever. For the rest of your life, you will always be that writer. However, every book you write after that one, and I'm talking about every single one for the rest of your life, is an absolute dumpster fire. critically trashed, and a commercial zero. You are called a washed up hack who can no longer even string together two cohesive sentences. Or you keep writing as you've always done. You are generally well respected, but there's not all that much money into it, or not much more than you make now. So if we're up to you, given those two choices, which career do you pick? All or nothing, or steady as she goes?
Definitely steady as she goes, because writing isn't my life. I have a day job that I enjoy. I feel like having like epic international success would just be like really boring after a while, and I have too much to do. And I have too many stories to tell. So, and I don't want them to suck. So.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. So we're going to take a few questions. I have a few more that we didn't get to, so I'm going to flip back. I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that Amos was one of the best characters on The Expanse. So talk to me a little bit about how he evolved over the show and how much he stuck to his own value system right down to the very end. JL, what do you think?
So I have like different favorite characters kind of every season, along with just Amos being my favorite character, because I think that he was something about his characterization allowed him to be the most consistent character, but they also, so like you always kind of knew what you were going to get, but because of that consistency, he managed to like surprise me at every turn, which I kind of loved.
Kelli?
So this is interesting because I don't think he changed that much. Like I think he just learned to like widen his circle and to maybe include himself in his circle of like safe people. Because I think at the beginning he just kind of had blinders on because he had to. But like you said, I mean, I feel like his sort of values are the same through the show. He's a rock in that sense. And his directionality of where those values get pointed evolves in a really interesting way.
And I thought for me, and I don't know if you guys agree, is that I think a real pivotal moment for him was in season 5, right? When they go back to Earth and, and he finds Peaches and at one point he says, he realizes that he's slipping. He's kind of he's reverting back to the old Amos, before he hooked up with Naomi and the Rocinante. And I think he said something along the lines of like, I really need to get back to my crew. Because he knew that like he needed someone else to kind of help him be a little bit more of a moral guidepost for him, so that he knew enough. He got to a point, I think, where he knew enough about him. He was self-aware enough to know that he needed somebody else's light to shine for him. He kind of figured out that he kind of knew what was the light and what was the dark. And he kind of said, I need someone else to be that light. But once I find it, I'm going to follow that path.
And the fact that he was self-aware enough to understand that while he was literally surviving an apocalypse was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It's super impressive. And also, like, I think you mentioned this earlier, Russ, but the fact that he kind of becomes that light a little bit for Clarissa toward the end. So he comes full circle on that, which is cool.
And I mean, I love that, really at the end, whether it was maybe it was the final episode or basically, and I may be paraphrasing where he says, if I have to go out, I want to do it. I want to be on the front line protecting my family. I said, I can't really think of a better way. If I'm going to go down, I can't really think of a better way to do it.
That is Amos in a sentence.
Right. I mean, that's him. It's like, you know what? Because he's sort of like, and it's interesting to me is that, he didn't really judge those scenarios. He just says it just is. So if this is what it is, how do I want to go about it? He's like, well,
he's really like the epitome of radical acceptance in that sense. Like he wasn't freaking out about the thing.
Right.
Like, this is the thing. This is what we have to do then, you know?
Right. If this is the end, then it's the end. I can't do anything. All I can do is my part, and it'll go how it goes.
Can we just acknowledge like how cool the drop sequence was when they dropped all those boxes and they all like confettied down onto the
Can we also talk about how cool it is that and how cool the set designers are, that if you zoom in on the names of the 40 drop people, they are all names from science fiction.
Yes, I saw that. There's a couple from Star Wars in there. Ripley, there was a bunch from Aliens was in there, like
Sarah Connor.
There was a bunch from like there was some from Dune. There was Jack O'Neill with 2 L's from Stargate, which I appreciate.
Okay, all right. So last but not least, did they stick the landing?
I think so. If we assume that it can only be this length, then yes, they did a good job sticking the landing in the amount of runway that they had. Obviously, I wanted more story. I think that season could have maybe benefited from being able to breathe a little bit more. Yeah. But I love it. It's a great show.
JL?
I think that if they had to stop the storyline, they did it at the right place for numerous reasons, which I won't talk about because I've read all the books. But having that fuller context, I think they not only stuck the landing, but they remained true to the fact that they were telling kind of 2 different types of stories between the books and the TV show.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for me, this goes down, if not only as one of my favorite sci-fi shows, it's just one of my favorite shows of any genre ever. For me, I think it probably peaked for me at season 3. But that's sort of, the bar is just so high. If season 3 is a 10, I mean, how do you stay at 10?
The best example that I like to give is season 4, which is essentially book 4. Book 4 was the only one of the entire 9-book series that was a 4-star read for me, as opposed to a 5-star read. And season 4 is one of my favorite seasons of the show.
It's funny. It's the one I think gets the most criticism, but I thought it was excellent.
I love that season.
I think it's great. I think it was really just so top notch. I would just say for me, just in season 6, just the fact that the bit on Laconia was just a little bit, it was a little bit underbaked on that one, and I wanted a little more heft on that side of it. So I think that from a storytelling side, I would ding that final season a little bit. But in terms of the scope of what they did and how much they packed in, I mean, it's pretty tough to get a lot more, into 62 episodes than we got from The Expanse. So to everyone who was involved, I mean, just well fucking done, man. I'm sorry, just well done. Okay, so with the few minutes we have left, I'm going to share my screen, and then we're going to call it a day. All right, so what do we got here? Okay, so is this coming up right?
Yes, it is.
All right, so Kel, what do we got?
So this is an anthology called Turning the Tide that was put out recently by the International Association of Media Tie-in Writers. You can see all the fabulous folks who contributed there on the cover. And this is all tie-in fiction for public domain works. And it is a charity anthology supporting the World Literacy Foundation. And I was able to write a sequel to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that I really enjoyed to contribute to this book. So if you enjoy reading tie-in fiction, this might be something that you want to check out.
All right, right on. Okay. All right, JL, what do we got?
So the last time I was on the show talking about The Expanse, I only had 5 books in my series out, and now I have 6 books out.
All right.
So this is, in fact, the penultimate book, and I'm solidly in taking everything that I established in book 1 and changing all the rules, and like having so much fun, like taking urban fantasy as to its limits in terms of blending a world with both magic and technology.
All right, very cool. All right, that's great. All right, folks, and as for me, if you're a fan of Miller, I'll encourage you to check out my sci-fi noir series featuring hard-boiled intergalactic private eye, Angela Hardwick, part Doctor Who, part Blade Runner, part Philip Marlowe, in both Crackle and Fire, and the second one, Fractured Lives. Hardwick and her young protege, Eric Whistler, walk the streets of eternity, the galactic realm that oversees the design, construction, and maintenance of the universe. The cases take them on realm and off, not only challenging their ideas about how deep the corruption can go, but the very nature of the relationship between mentor and mentee. In Crackle and Fire, they are hired by an accountant who gets mixed up with dueling gangsters and a madman with galactic ambitions of his own. And in Fractured Lives, my most cyberpunk of the 2 books, they are hired to find out if a college freshman who is also a galaxy design savant is suffering from a nervous breakdown or is the victim of an urban legend known as the Scarlet Raj. Crackle and Fire and Fractured Lives are available on Amazon and published by Crazy 8 Press. Well, book 3 in the series, which I am almost done with, will be out in September. All right, so I want to thank Kelli and JL for coming on the show and talking about just such a fantastic series. And I want to thank everyone who will be watching it online. I'm your host, Russ Colchamiro. And as always, I will see you all next week. All right, take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye now. This was great.